When Trayvon Martin was shot, at first I was like, yeah, he shouldn't have been wearing a hoodie. He shouldn't have been buying Skittles, right? But the more I said that out loud, it just started sounding crazy to me. Like, this man shouldn't have been wearing a hoodie and buying Skittles. What's up, guys? It's Afro Angie for Kingdom and Community. If you're new, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. On this channel, I talk all things film, activism, and entrepreneurship slash mompreneurship, because all of those things are part of my life. So if that's part of your life, I think you will really love the content on this channel. So be sure to check out some other videos. Today, I kind of want to share a little bit of my story about how I really got interested in activism and why I'm so passionate about helping the Black community and just really like reminding our people of what we're capable of and what we can do for ourselves. A lot of people don't know this because I'm very passionate, especially on TikTok. If you follow me on TikTok, you know, we get real over there. We have real conversations. We talk about the tough stuff. But I actually grew up kind of what you would consider an Uncle Tom. Now, the correct word for that is actually a Sambo. But when I say Uncle Tom, you know what I mean. So that's just what I'm going to say for the sake of this video. But I grew up in a predominantly white space for the majority of my life. In fact, it wasn't until I went to college at an HBCU that for the first time I was actually not the minority in my everyday life. I've kind of shared small bits and pieces of this on my post-grad healing journey video. But my mom was adopted and she was really traumatized by her own people. She went through a lot, and so because of that, she kind of raised us to like stay far away from the Black community, unintentionally in some ways. But we didn't go to Black churches. With her being adopted, we didn't have really any family. All of the family that we knew that took us in under their arms, under their wing, they were white people. We had an aunt and an uncle who did take us under their wing, but other than that, for the most part, we were surrounded by white people. And then when I was in school, I was one of the good ones, right? So I was like always like the only Black girl in my classes, especially in high school, and they were very, very rigorous classes. And so I felt this pressure to perform. And again, I won't go too much into that because I already spoke on that in that video. So you may want to check that out for a little bit more context. I'll tell you the point that really radicalized me. When Trayvon Martin was shot, and I believe that was in 2012, at first I was like, yeah, he shouldn't have been wearing a hoodie. He shouldn't have been buying Skittles, right? But the more I said that out loud, it just started sounding crazy to me. Like, this man shouldn't have been wearing a hoodie and buying Skittles. Because again, remember, before this happened, I was one of the good ones, and I really internalized that. I didn't want to be the stereotype. I was just trying to make sure like I made sure people knew that I wasn't like the typical Black person, right? Which now I feel like, what? It's an honor to be the typical Black person. I feel like Black people have endured so much. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. The Trayvon Martin incident kind of really shook me. I was like, something doesn't quite feel right about this. But anyways, I kept going along about my business, kept my head down, kept being one of the good ones. But in 2015, when Mike Brown was shot, I could no longer ignore it. When Mike Brown was shot and he was running away from the police, and then the Black Lives Matter movement erupted, for the first time, I just couldn't take it anymore. Like, are y'all kidding me? Like, this is ridiculous. I was a senior in high school. I was the only Black girl in my class. There was a girl who was biracial. She had a Black mom and a German dad. But with her dad being German, she kind of had this element of, what would you call it? Like exoticness, and everybody wanted to be her friend. And so she didn't really try to ruffle any feathers. And until that point, I really hadn't either. But then I started noticing like the microaggressions started like piling on. And I wonder if any kids had to like experience this in 2020 when it was like Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd and so many, God rest their souls. I wonder if the kids who are in school had to go through that too. Like, as racial relations get worse, do microaggressions get worse too? I don't know, but that was my experience. And it was just like piling on. It was piling on. My senior year was actually life-changing for me because at the same time, I was also applying for colleges. And I was in this program called the International Baccalaureate Program, which is like AP on steroids. It was very, very challenging. And, I grew up pretty, my socioeconomic status compared to that of my classmates was a lot lower. I was leaving classes, working 2 jobs, still managing my extracurricular activities, but I was stressed out of my mind, yet and still I was doing the best I could to perform, again trying not to be the stereotype. So that being said, I graduated 9th out of 140 in my class, but for some reason all of the colleges that I was applying to, I wasn't getting a lot of scholarship money. And the only school in Arkansas, because I was just applying to schools in Arkansas, wasn't quite ready to go out of state. I was still kind of wanting to stay close to my family and all that good stuff, whatever. I also didn't really think I could at the time. But anyways, so the only college in my state that gave me a full ride scholarship despite my academic achievements was the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, which is an HBCU. Now, mind you, I'm just now going through this process of really understanding that America is still racist. Like before that, like I knew some people, were racist, but I thought that they were like, what do you call them, anomalies. Like for the most part, white people, we were all cool. Like people didn't have a problem or anything. But what I realized is a lot of times racism is hidden when oppression is high and people don't speak out. When people start speaking out, racism starts to rear its ugly head again. And so again, I wasn't aware of that. Like I was completely oblivious. I thought things were all good. And I also thought, in order to not be the stereotype, I needed to get away from my people and show everybody that I could be better than them. Just being real. Like a lot of people might watch this video and be like, oh, she thinks she's all that. I'm telling you the truth about, what I thought growing up in spaces where I was one of the only ones, if not the only one. And I'm also telling you what a lot of people think, but might never say. You might see it in their actions, but they won't admit it. I'm being 100% honest with y'all. Like, I thought like I needed to get away from my people. I'm doing so good in life because I'm not around black people. I'm not like most black people. That is how I honestly felt. And so when UAPB was the only school to give me a full ride, in fact, my recruiter, she was white. Her name is Cece. She became like my big sister to this day. We are still close. And she came to recruit me several times. And every time she came, I would be like, I do not know why you're here. I'm never going to that school. That school is ghetto. It's in Pine Bluff. Like, I just wasn't interested. I just thought I was too good for it. I was raised to think that I was too good for an HBCU. I'm just being real. Anyway, that's where I went. Absolutely loved my experience at UAPB. I was so embarrassed that I thought that way, but at the same time, I know that me sharing my story can probably help a lot of people. While I was at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, I flew on a plane for the very first time. It was completely paid for because, again, I grew up, socioeconomic status was pretty low. So, I didn't want to go to an HBCU because I didn't think it would provide me the opportunities that I wanted to see in life. I couldn't have been more wrong. Flew on a plane for the first time. Went to several leadership conferences for collegiate students and met some amazing people who I am still connected to in some way to this day. I studied abroad in Mexico for 5 weeks. That experience was largely paid for. I went to New York City for the first time. I saw Wall Street. I saw United Nations. I saw the Federal Reserve Bank. That trip was completely paid for. I became Miss University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff, which is like the campus queen, and I was the #1 queen in ebony during my time. Just a completely unreal experience that I almost didn't even get to see. I wouldn't have even known it was possible because of the brainwashing that I had experienced growing up in my community. Now, I say all of this to tell my story, right? But I want to be very clear. I'm not bashing anybody who was a part of my upbringing. I would not be who I was without them. And a lot of us have a lot of unlearning to do. I was just fortunate to be able to reflect on mine. But I'm not trying to bash anybody who was part of my upbringing. I still have love for everybody to this day. But I gotta keep it real. It was during my time as Miss University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff that I really got to connect with the Pine Bluff community. On top of that, I was still fired up from the Mike Brown event. So throughout my college tenure, especially as I was learning more about the history of my people, especially in Arkansas, my passion was getting more and more fueled. So I started reading these books. And I also had this teacher. He was my finance teacher, and finance was my major in college, so I had a lot of his classes. He was from California. He's a doctor. Some people say that he's a millionaire. He was the teacher who financed our trip to New York, where we got to see Wall Street and United Nations and things like that. And he was also very much an activist, and he was someone who kind of helped me understand that it takes those of us who have the talent and the means and the resources to go back and extend a hand to those who do not. He was often frustrated with us because a lot of times, the people who were in my major and those who he would try to take under his wing, we didn't understand the necessity of what he was trying to teach us and how dire our situation in America as Black people is. And so he would just keep being passionate. And a lot of times, like, looking back, I feel bad because we just didn't get it. But yet and still, I'm grateful that he even took the time, because I can reflect on that as I get older. I just remember his lessons about his time while he was at Stanford, I believe is the school. This man was like a really good professor, and he could have been anywhere. He had all the accolades, all the degrees, but if you looked at him, you wouldn't know it. He would wear like these jogging pants and like this same polo. It looked like it probably came from Goodwill. I mean, he just didn't care about material things. He wanted us to be prepared for the future. He wanted us to be competitive. Throughout my experience at UAPB, I'm just learning and really getting fired up. And now, I have to be honest, it was not my HBCU that inspired me to be an activist. Now, while my HBCU gave me confidence in other areas and really helped me to believe in myself, I think HBCUs try not to step on any toes and try to prove that, we're not. Sometimes I think HBCUs try to prove that we're not the stereotype as well. But just being surrounded by my people gave me the confidence that I needed. Like, I didn't even realize how not confident I was, how insecure I was, and it made people uncomfortable. But getting back to the topic, my interest was sparked with the Mike Brown and the Black Lives Matter movement of 2015. So I started following these people on Twitter, and just really like understanding or being interested in other like thought leaders who would speak on topics that I never really cared to even listen to, but certainly never got to see in my predominantly white town. So that, combined with being surrounded by my people, some of whom might agree with me, some who didn't, because just because I was surrounded by Black people don't mean we all thought the same, okay? I had to make that very clear. But then that, combined with me being Miss UAPB and understanding leadership, and then getting to know the community of Pine Bluff, who in every way is one of those communities that people, try to write off, try to stereotype, just everything that I have been running from my entire life as a Black person, I'm smack dab in the middle of in college. I'm getting to know people, and I'm getting to know the history of Pine Bluff, and I'm getting to see people, building businesses, being in political office, and it just seemed like Pine Bluff was like an autonomous town. And I was just thinking, like, this is what we need as a people. Like, this is the solution for the Black community, not one or two billionaires here and there. Like, that's great, but that's not helping all of us rise. What's helping all of us rise is community. And so just getting to see that, like getting front row seats to the real solution that our community needs. Now, even though Pine Bluff isn't perfect, getting to see that every day in real life, man, it just really made me want to go so much harder for my people. And that's why I love this town to this day. I'm here as long as I can be, as long as God will, provide and sustain. I would love to be part of the change here, but not just here. Like, being here shows me that it's possible. And yes, it's going to be hard. It's going to take time to undo the psychological and physical damage that's been done to our communities. But just seeing that it's possible, that gets me fired up. So much so that, if you look at my channel, I've even read books, like just going, I don't want to say down the rabbit hole, but just on this journey to just wondering what can be done, what can be shared to spark the minds that are going to change our community. It's interesting, the journey that God will take you on, because I never wanted to be in a place like Pine Bluff. I never wanted to go to an HBCU, but because of the experiences, because I was fed up with the racism that I was experiencing my whole life. I just didn't even know it. But especially when Mike Brown happened, it was like that was something that needed to happen in order for me to truly cherish my time in Pine Bluff and soak up the opportunity that we have here. And in any community that's being written off, like, that's a springboard. But I would never have known that if I didn't have my life experience while I was running away from this exact type of location. And so yeah, I hope that makes some kind of sense. My story, sometimes I don't know if I'll completely process this story, and I might tell it again one day in a better way. But I just wanted to be transparent that, you know, I haven't always been an activist. In fact, I've sometimes been like the person that the activist is like trying to silence, because, you know, sometimes those of us who have access to the spaces with resources that our community need, our voices and our experiences sometimes can silence those who are suffering and in dire need of help. And I was definitely one of those people, and yet still God used me, and I'm so thankful. And so I just want to share that story of how Afro Angie became an activist when she was on the journey to being an Uncle Tom. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about that. If you have had a similar experience, because I shared this kind of on TikTok and I didn't know that it was such a common experience. So if you have also had something similar happen to you in your life, I would love to hear that in the comments. And until next time, guys, seek the kingdom and serve the community.